George R.R. Martin is 74 years old and has yet to finish his penultimate book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. This begs the question, even if he does finish Winds of Winter, what are the chances he'll have enough time left to cap it all off with A Dream of Spring? I want to preface this video by saying that this isn't some statement of value or what one person should find the most important in their lives. You could obviously have a million different discussions about what a person's or an author's priorities should be once they grow older. Could be that they just prefer to spend their older years with their family. I'm just choosing to discuss what this means for the A Song of Ice and Fire series because that's the book-related one, I guess. So what are the chances? This is very hard to predict. You know, George R.R. Martin could have only days left, or he could live past 100, we have no idea. Now, I will actually be optimistic. This is, I admit, purely speculation on my part, but late last year, George R.R. Martin came out for the first time in a while and stated how far he actually was with The Winds of Winter. Now, this is purely, you know, my psychoanalysis of this man that I've never met in my life. But I think this is a good sign. Before that, he had been hesitant to give specifics, but now he has come out and actually said he is around 3/4 through. Now, the average person hearing that will go, only 75%? Ugh, just end me now. But I think him beginning to state specifics might mean that he's actually begun diving back into it. I think it's obvious that throughout the years he's had his ups and downs with progress, you know, periods where he was writing and periods where he wasn't writing. Now, in the best case scenario, this might mean that he has thought, okay, I'm starting to get old. Maybe I should start speeding this up if I want to finish this up before I kick the bucket. I could also just be deluding myself and coping my way through my entire thought process. But you know, we gotta believe. Now you might say, well, Oscar, even if that is the case, he's still got to write a whole ass nother book after Winds of Winter. And to that I say, well, he wrote the first couple of books in 2-year intervals, so he might be able to make it, right? Now, what if he doesn't? And as depressing as it is to say, this might be the more likely scenario, depending of course upon how fate blesses the health of this beautiful man. What'll happen in this worst case scenario? Will the series be left with one, or God forbid, 2 books missing? Now that isn't for sure the case. It might be rare, but we've seen a couple of larger book series throughout the years being finished up by another author, based upon notes or whatnot that the original creator left behind. The most famous example of this within the fantasy space is probably The Wheel of Time, where we lost the esteemed Robert Jordan way too early back in 2007. This series saw now big shot Brandon Sanderson take up the reins and write not one, but the last 3 books in this series, all to extremely positive reviews. Now, this was probably also one of the best things that could have happened to this series after we tragically lost Robert Jordan, with Brandon Sanderson being not only an amazing writer, but also a big, long-time fan of the series. But in the worst case scenario, is this something that is in the cards for A Song of Ice and Fire? Who could finish this series? I've seen most people online suggest Joe Abercrombie, whose first book I've actually reviewed here on the channel. Spoiler, it was amazing. But I've also seen people mention Neil Gaiman or Neil Stephenson. These could be viable authors as well, but I've seen most people talk about Abercrombie. And it makes sense. He is probably one of the biggest grimdark authors, along with, of course, George R.R. Martin. And his works have been widely received as incredible, which they are. His character work is absolutely amazing, and he is as capable as any to pull something like this off. And he's also stated A Song of Ice and Fire to be one of the biggest inspirations for his career. Now, the elephant in the room here, and the reason why some people might prefer other authors instead, is that although he is an amazing author, and in my opinion on par with George R.R. Martin, he does have a few things that distinguishes him. He has quite a different and more modern tone than George R.R. Martin has, and he has quite a bit less focus on world building and the epic scale of the world than George R.R. Martin has. A Song of Ice and Fire has a wide variety of characters all across Westeros, where from what I've seen from Abercrombie, he focuses more exclusively on the more personal take and on the characters and their thought processes. Now, don't get me wrong, Abercrombie's world building is still great. it's just not quite on the scale that George R.R. Martin says. Now, all of this of course hinges on if George R.R. Martin even wants other people to finish his books. I found an interview from 2015 where he states he doesn't ever see anyone else writing in his universe, and I couldn't find anything more recent to dispute that. So it might be the case that if he doesn't make it, he doesn't want it to be finished, and it's an understandable notion. Now, I believe Robert Jordan said the same thing but changed his mind near the end, but don't quote me on that. So what's the conclusion? Does A Song of Ice and Fire really have a future? I mean, I guess it all depends on how fast George R.R. Martin is and how long he stays healthy. If it's the case that he isn't able to finish it though, its future, at least in book form, might be bleak. But we have seen the universe blossom on the TV screen, with the very successful House of the Dragon last year, and hopefully also the upcoming Jon Snow series, if that is still on the way. I haven't heard about it in quite a bit of time. But anyways, that was just my short take on it. Do you guys think he'll finish? And if he doesn't, do you think he'll change his mind on letting others finish? And if you enjoyed, why don't you subscribe or come join me at my Discord and come talk to me? And otherwise, I'll see you guys.